My name is Gail Cormier. I am a professor at Saint-Boniface University in Manitoba, Canada, and I will explain to you where that is because I know that it's not a place that's well known. So just to even give a general idea, so my project, some of the data I'm reporting on comes from my PhD thesis, and I was looking at linguistic landscapes, but specifically schoolscapes in schools who taught French. So that represents about 3 actual, if we want to call it native speakers, native French speakers in Manitoba. The province that I'm studying represents only 3.4% of the population, but we also have people who participate in the French immersion program, which I'll explain a bit later. But this is a map of Canada here. So you'll see that usually when we think about French in Canada, we think about Eastern Canada. So Montreal, Quebec, those are the places where we normally think of French speakers. So where I'm, and then actually Western Canada, as we can see, the darker it gets, the more people speak both English and French, which are the official languages of Canada. So I'm actually, my project takes place and I work, the university is in the little darker space in this map, but we're actually surrounded by a lot of monolingual English speakers in this area. So the percentages are pretty low, but nevertheless, because French is an official language, we have 2 types of schools that offer programming in French. So French minority language schools, and also French immersion schools. And the national enrollment in French immersion schools is about 7.5%. So even so, there's that both of those programs together make for a very small portion of the population that studies in French. So to give you an idea about linguistic landscapes, I know everyone has a good handle on this, but just to situate us a little bit with a bit of theory. So I use both Senos and Gorder and also Landry and Borges. Landry and Borges are Canadian scholars. They actually invented the name linguistic landscapes, but they're not, they didn't really do much research with it afterwards. It was more the Europeans who took up the word and actually developed and also Shawami, who developed the research methodology and etc. But I actually met Rodrigue Landry at a conference where he spoke to me about linguistic landscapes and how he was so amazed that this one study gets often cited because it was really a really small section of his ethnography looking at francophones across Canada. So this is my university, Université de Saint-Boniface. Half of the year, it is the winter in Manitoba. So you can see the snow is even covering the sign. So that part of our linguistic landscape is also the geography. And we do teach in an area where we have winter and it's very cold. Sometimes up until minus 40 Celsius. So it gets very cold. Because we have the 2 languages that interact, mainly the 2 official languages, there are linguistic landscapes can also be reflective of conflicts. And I've used that idea a lot to explore some of the past conflicts that lead to perhaps some of the current beliefs about bilingualism. So like I said, English and French are the official languages, and outside of the province of Quebec, French is a minority language. So you see at the top sign here, we have it says Vieux Saint-Boniface, and the signs are in bilingual. So Avenue Taché, Taché Avenue. So it's written in French and in English. And on the other side of the sign, it says Old St. Boniface. So this is one of the only areas, because it's considered the French Quarter, where we actually have bilingual signage. Everywhere else, it's mostly just in English. And except for signs that are related to the federal government, so the national signs. But I wanted to also, another area that really interests me in linguistic landscapes is graffiti. And I used these exact slides that you'll be seeing right now. I used these to explore past conflicts between the two linguistic groups in Manitoba with pre-service teachers. So those who were doing a Bachelor of Education, and we wanted to look at, we have a course specifically about the history and linguistic identity, and we wanted to look at how graffiti is indicative of a historical time period. So this is originally the bridge that connected the French Quarter to the rest of English Manitoba. And you can see that somebody wrote on the bridge, Canadians want to speak English, let the majority rule. So it's misspelled, which is very interesting, but it gives you an idea of some of the sentiments that were kind of circulating at the time. I'll give you an idea more of what was happening. So in the 1980s, because in the 70s, there was the Canadian Charter of Rights that stipulated that Canada had 2 official languages. And because of that, that gave rights to Francophones outside of Quebec to education and service in the French language. So because of that, they were allowed rights that they had been taken away in the past. And there was a lot of animosity and a lot of anger, to the point where this building that you see in this picture is La Société Franco-Manitobaine. So it was a society for Francophones, cultural center, and it was burned down. It was an act of arson was committed. Nobody was injured, luckily, but it just went to show that at the time in the 80s, there was a lot of people who were against rights for Francophones in the province. And you can see written on the building is No More French. In the background, that is very, very close to my university, just really 2 streets down. So it's, I'll show you the picture again, but you know, that it's very important for me to show to the students where they're studying now and the past that occurred right really on their doorstep. So yeah, the university is really just 2 streets down. So when we really think about graffiti, I see it as multimodal language. Typically, so my graffiti that I've shown here is very monomodal. It's just writing. But when we think of graffiti, this is more, I guess, a modern day type of graffiti. There's a lot of color. There's a lot of symbolism. And we really, in language and literacy, it's really quite multimodal. And I also showed students more current vandalism that occurred So this is, again, on the same bridge between the English and the French side. We have one sign in English. It's very difficult to see, but a second sign in French, and it has been damaged. When I went by, it looked like somebody had taken a bat and had tried to damage the sign. Now, this is qualitative research, so there's no way of actually proving what the intentions of the person were, but I think that it's representative a bit of some of the feelings and the sentiments towards Francophones that still exist. But now again, going to how we can use this in classrooms and how I use it with teachers before they go into the classroom. So what I've looked at is that a few different examples of how other people have used it. So one of the examples is that the students are going out into their community, they're taking the pictures, and then they're bringing them back into the class. Or another example is the teacher takes specific pictures, frames them, and then the students look at that. When this is done in class, others have said this can lead to language learning and language awareness. I've also, at the time when I was doing this, my first study, there was not a lot written on schoolscapes. Like I finished my PhD in 2018, so I was working on it in 2013 to 2015, and there was really nothing that even the word, I think I used scholastic linguistic landscapes because there wasn't even the word schoolscape. So it's very new research, and there's a lot of really interesting things coming out that we saw at the conference. But at the time, these studies, the past ones, focused on using the linguistic landscape outside of the school. And I wanted to look at inside the school and how the schoolscape itself can be studied with students. So my study was a schoolscape study. It used 3 different research sites. And I looked at French immersion and French minority schools. I had 37 participants from 3 different schools who were in what we consider high school, grade 11. I conducted semi-structured interviews with the students, but this is the part which was perhaps still to this day a bit unique. I took pictures of each of the school's linguistic landscapes, and then I used a technique called photo elicitation interviews, and each student then analyzed those schoolscape images with me. And so I had at the time 11 digital images, kind of like in a PowerPoint presentation that the students went through and analyzed. And then I had also printed out pictures on a table. This was before COVID, where we could touch things and etc. But they then had the choice of which images to analyze. And that was really interesting because it was a bit of a display. So the next images we're showing here are images from that study that I conducted in 2018. So what the results were when students participate in the analysis of a school's linguistic landscape, I found that they themselves report incidental language learning. They recognize and discuss linguistic diversity. And this is without prompting. This is without me asking, oh, do you notice linguistic diversity? It's simply them doing it themselves and recognizing it themselves. And then I linked this to the idea of translanguaging, which is very prominent theory in language education. And so if we use linguistic landscapes in the class and the students are analyzing them, I really think it is a way to recognize and leverage their entire language repertoire, especially if the images represent the diversity that exists in the local community. So I'm going to show you a few examples of how I feel my participants actually ended up learning language and becoming more aware of their linguistic community. So this sign right here, this was in the French school, and what it says is the doors are locked at 4 o'clock every day. This sign was the sign that all the students, because the images were mixed up between the schools, so the students looked at the images, analyzed them, and they actually they commented, and some of them guessed, like, oh, where does this sign come from, etc. So this was a sign that all the students in the French school said, this is from my school. I see it every single day, and it's right at the entrance. So it was really like a sign. It's very simple, but very recognizable because of the wording and where it was located. So when we look at bilingual signs, we have students who say, well, when we see signs in both languages, it helps us to learn the language, and you can remember what it is in both languages. And also students wanted bilingual signs in the school because they felt that if there was a French part of the school, that they would be reading and applying their language more. And this is actually true, because when multilinguals read signs, they read all the languages and they don't just focus on one. This is not, my image here is actually just written in French, but I have more that are written in both. And actually I had 4 participants that said that they would actually speak more in French if there were more signs in the school in French. This is really important for language production, which is an area that I look at as well, integrating language into all school subjects. And so oral production is quite important. So the fact that the students themselves would actually make a link like that is really interesting. This sign was the one that created the most discussion, and you'll see that really the students had no training in linguistic landscape analysis. It was really just look at the signs and tell me what you see. And we'll see that they actually are referencing things that other researchers have found. So in this sign, it's notable because in our specific context in Canada, these are not necessarily languages that are really well or highly spoken. So a student walked into the class, into the interview room, and this was one of the signs that was printed out on the table. And he said, I looked at it earlier, and as soon as I walked in, I did a quick scan, and I didn't see Swahili in there. That is one of the languages he spoke at home, and it wasn't on the sign. So especially in Canada, there's a really strong push for the original inhabitants of the country, the Aboriginal languages. No Aboriginal languages are present on this sign, and only 3 of the most widely spoken languages in Manitoba are found on this sign. Students also noticed that welcome is there twice. They really had quite effective responses to this particular sign. Some in the way felt, oh, it's very inclusive, and others felt it was very exclusive. So although they feel that the idea is to promote diversity, they saw that English was very highly valued in the sign due to the color, the font size, and we've in linguistic landscape, those things indicate language status. So the students were not oblivious to this. They were able to notice that. So, and even Vera, like I said, a very effective response. I don't like that our English welcome is the dominant because it's above everything else. So it's like we're holding ourselves above you, which is very interesting. So she places herself in this position. I don't like that. It should be at the same level, the same size as the other welcome signs. So again, schoolscapes as a pedagogical tool, when students are actually involved in the analysis, they are using their multimodal literacy skills and their entire linguistic repertoire. Because as we saw in the last sign, to notice if a language you speak is there or not, you're activating your entire linguistic repertoire. And it actually requires them to explore multiple forms and multiple literacy resources, not only just reading and writing, but things like font size and color and presentation. When you analyze students' own school, they actually reported language learning and a deeper language awareness with the presence of French and English in their school. Another way to look at linguistic landscape use in schools is for students to design aspects of their own schoolscape so that, again, they develop language learning and awareness. And it's a very authentic way to recognize and leverage the actual language spoken by the students. So if we go back to the last sign over here, why not get the students to design a sign that represents all the languages that are spoken in the school at that actual time? And then again, speaking of at the university level now, I think it's a very useful tool, especially when we go through time to show examples of graffiti, to view historical conflict among linguistic communities, and to analyze schoolscape images to expose them to different scholastic contexts. And I also did photo elicitation interviews that I adapted into group work with my pre-service teachers, just so that they would start analyzing the images as well to see if they would be able to see things like language status and the importance given to certain languages. So to conclude, when we ask students to analyze their own and other schoolscapes, this is translanguaging, and it's highlighting the complexity of their own translanguaging practices. And I think it's really crucial in every context that students be made aware of the linguistic diversity that surrounds them in and also outside of their classroom. And I think also pre-service teachers would benefit from being exposed to different schoolscapes and could also learn about historical regions and conflicts in the area of their school's linguistic landscape. So yes, I have some publications here. if you are interested, I will also send the presentation by PDF if you want to look at that afterwards. And then those are my references.